And one of the best things that's going on right now culturally is a little documentary you may have heard about that's taken me back to like the heart of my childhood. It's a documentary called The Last Dance, and it's about the last season of Michael Jordan when he played for the Chicago Bulls. Now, I know some of you who are watching today are, a little younger than me, and, you've only seen this guy named Michael Jordan on YouTube. But I want to help your dads out right now who are trying to mentor you, and they're trying to lead you in the ways of the Lord, okay? And maybe you've been a little bit, obstinate against your father's leadership in your life. So let me just clear this up, because I think this is a word from the Lord, okay? Michael Jordan is the GOAT. Okay, there's no doubt about that. Okay, he is the greatest basketball player of all time. And so for those of you who are a little younger than me and you've been arguing with your dad about LeBron and MJ or Kobe and MJ, or I actually have a friend who said Magic Johnson over MJ. Okay, if you're of this persuasion, you need to repent, okay, and you need to apologize to your dad, who's maybe my age or older, who watched the greatest basketball player of all time play in his prime and do the things that he did. And my family's actually been watching this documentary. It's been pretty cool. I've been going back in time, and these things get over about 11 o'clock at night. Like, I'm ready to strap up my gym shoes and go out and play some hoops. It's been pretty cool. And one of the things that stood out to me that I'm sure stood out to you if you've watched it, and if you've kind of watched the trajectory of Michael Jordan's life and career, is that he does not forget. And one of the things that's come out in this documentary, and even if you haven't seen it, this is intriguing, that some of like his enemies when he played the game, some of the players that he went against who roughed him up and who tried to take him out of his game at the time, who had cross words with him on the court, it's evident even today, all of these years later, that there is still a lot of animosity, there is a lot of bitterness, and certainly Michael Jordan has not forgotten the hard words that were spoken and the hard actions that took place on and off the court. And you can't miss that when you're watching this documentary and you're kind of tracking Jordan's life. Like, this man does not forget, and he still holds grudges. And we've been studying for the past couple of weeks a lady by the name of Naomi, who also has been through some incredibly difficult circumstances, to put it mildly. We actually saw our very first week in this series that Naomi was so upset and just so broken by her circumstances that she changed her name. When she went back home, she changed her name from Naomi to Bitter. I mean, you talk about someone who's not forgetting. I mean, you talk about someone who's like, this is going to stay with me the rest of my life. You talk about someone who had good reason to struggle the way she did. I mean, Naomi is it. I mean, she is the primary figure of the story of Ruth up to this point. And we've seen how Naomi went to a place called Moab through the leadership of her husband during a time of famine where she grew up in Bethlehem in Israel. And when she got to Moab, she lost her husband, she lost her 2 sons. She ends up returning home, and going with her is her daughter-in-law named Ruth. And so we saw last week how Ruth and Naomi get back to Israel, and Naomi is just so bitter, and she's changed her name and all the things we've discussed. And Ruth says to her on one particular occasion, she says, hey, is it okay with you if I go out to a field to glean some grain? And the process of gleaning was simply walking behind workers in a field and picking up the fallen grain that was left over. It was something reserved for the needy and for the outcast. And it was a very dangerous proposition because Ruth, as a young lady, especially a young Moabite lady, she was putting herself in incredible danger. And Naomi, really having no choice, says, sure, you can go. And as we saw last week, God does not have any accidents. He only works through divine appointments. And it just so happened, remember the author of Ruth said that Ruth went gleaning in the field of a relative of Naomi's former husband. That she went to this field at the exact time when this man named Boaz was showing up on his way back from the city. And he just so happened to notice her when she was there and just so happened to take an interest in her when she was there. And when he heard about her predicament, because he was a noble, righteous, godly man, he was inclined to help her. And so he sent food back with Ruth in abundance. And remember, when he did that, Ruth asked him this pivotal question. She simply says to him, "Why have you shown such kindness to me, a foreigner?" And we saw there in kind of the second chapter of this story, just a glimpse of how God is working in our waiting. That he's working in what the world would deem just coincidence or random chance, but no, in God's economy, it's divine appointments. And he's working in such a way to show kindness to a people, even a people who don't deserve it. And so Ruth goes back to Naomi, and Naomi is just overwhelmed by the generosity of this man. And that begins the wheels to turn in Naomi's mind. As we pick up the story today, we're going to pick it up in chapter 3, and we're going to find that Naomi is starting to turn a corner from a place of brokenness and bitterness to a place of hope and optimism. And it all unfolds for us as Ruth and Boaz begin to strike up a relationship. And so take your copy of God's Word. Let's go to Ruth chapter 3, and we'll just walk through a few verses here. And I want you to see today this glimmer of hope and enthusiasm that Naomi's going to carry forward because of how God's continuing to work. Check this out, Ruth 3 and verse 1. Now Ruth's mother-in-law Naomi said to her, "My daughter, shouldn't I find rest for you so that you will be taken care of?" In other words, Naomi says to Ruth here, you're going to need a husband. There's no other hope for you in this world than to get married and then eventually to bring forth a son. We've seen how that was critical to the culture in which Ruth and Naomi live. And so Naomi at this point, you're going to see her wheels turning here. She says to Ruth, "Now wait a minute. Isn't it right that I try to take care of you and I try to kind of push you in the right direction here when it comes to your future so that you can be taken care of?" Look at verse 2. She says, now isn't Boaz our relative? And haven't you been working with his female servants? He's really given you a place every single day to come and gather grain. This evening, he'll be winnowing barley at the threshing floor. And then watch this, verse 3, Naomi says, "And so I want you to take a bath, wash up," she says, "and put on some perfumed oil and wear your best clothes and go down to the threshing floor. But don't let the man know that you are there until he has finished eating and drinking." Now Naomi is working on a plan. So she says to Ruth, "Isn't it the right thing for me to try to take care of you for the rest of your life? As a widow, I have no standing in my culture. If you just hang with me by yourself, you'll be forced to glean the rest of your life. But there's a man, Boaz, who's shown such kindness to you, and he's a member of my family." In that culture, it meant that Boaz had the right to take Ruth as a wife because technically that would have been his family responsibility. And so Naomi says, here's what you need to do. You've got an option here. You've got a legitimate option here, and there's some reason for hope. And so she says, "Here's what I want you to do. I want you to get it cleaned up. I want you to take a bath. I want you to put on a little bit of perfumed oil and your best clothes and go down to the threshing floor." Now the threshing floor was actually outside of town. It was the place where people would throw the chaff up in the air, and then the grain would fall to the floor, and then they would collect it. And so there's this place outside of town. She said, Boaz is going to be there at this time. And she's like, "I want you to go down there, and I just want you to hang out. And don't make it known that you're there. I just kind of want you to be a fly on the wall and wait till he gets done eating and drinking. Wait till he's had his dinner and he's in a good mood." Ladies, this could be biblical evidence that men are much happier on a full stomach, all right? I don't know if you've ever seen these Snickers commercials like with Joe Pesci or someone like that. Somebody walks out, some guy walks out, he's super cranky, and then they give him a Snickers bar, and then after that, he's perfectly happy. That's kind of how men work. We're pretty simple creatures, actually. Just a little bit of food, and we're good to go. Sometimes a lot of food. And so she's like, let him have his dinner. And then after dinner, check this out, look at verse 4. When he lies down, notice the place where he's lying. In other words, don't go to the wrong man. And then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and then he will explain to you what you should do. Now, I just have to tell you, this is another cultural phenomena that I don't fully understand. Apparently, back in this day and time, they didn't do eHarmony, but if a woman wanted to court a man, she would wait for him to lie down in the cool of the evening, go, pull the blanket up off his bare feet, and then just wait. Now, I don't find that attractive. I find it kind of weird. And those of you ladies who are watching us and you're single, please do not put this into practice, all right, when social distancing guidelines go away. Don't go up to some man you're wanting to date, untie his shoes, and then just sit there and look at him, all right? I don't think this is a precedent for us, but that's what they did during that day and time. And so that's what Ruth does. Watch it, look at verse 5. Ruth says very simply, hey, I'll do everything you have said. And she went to the threshing floor and she did exactly what Naomi had instructed her to do. Now look at verse 7. Now after Boaz had ate, drank, and was in good spirits, again, he's had his dinner, now he's happy. He went to lie down at the end of the pile of the barley, and she came secretly and uncovered his feet and laid down. Now look at verse 8. At midnight, Boaz was startled. He woke up, and he turned over, and there lying at his feet was a woman. And so he says, who are you? And she says, I am Ruth, your servant. And then she says to him, take me under your wing, for you are a family redeemer. Now, what Ruth is asking Boaz to do is to consider taking her as his wife. The cultural dynamics of this are a little strange to us, but the point is crystal clear. Naomi instructed Ruth to go and to make it clear to Boaz that Ruth was interested in marrying him, as he had the right to do so because he was a family redeemer. He was in the line of Elimelech, Naomi's husband, and he had the legal right to take her as his wife. And it's amazing as you look at the whole unfolding drama here, what Ruth says to him in particular, especially with the language there when she says, take me under your wing. Because if you go back to chapter 2, if you remember, when Boaz first met Ruth, Boaz said to Ruth, may the Lord bless you, the God under whose wings you have come for refuge. And now, just days later, it seems, Ruth is coming back to Boaz and saying, would you take me under your wing? Perhaps this is how the Lord will continue to cover me with his grace and his provision, is through your love, your affection, and through our marriage. And so Boaz considers that, and he talks about a few logistical details there. And then let me fast forward to verse 14. I want to show you what happened next. And so she lied there at his feet until morning, but got up while it was still dark. And then Boaz said this, don't let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor. In other words, don't tell anyone else about what's happened here. And then this happens. He says, bring the shawl you're wearing and hold it out. And when she held it out, he shoveled 6 measures of barley onto her shawl, and she went into the town. And then she went to her mother-in-law, Naomi, who asked her, okay, well, what happened? Can you imagine Naomi that night? She probably couldn't have slept herself, and she's just wondering what happened. And Ruth didn't return in the middle of the night. That was a positive sign. And so she comes in early in the morning, and Naomi there is just kind of dying to know. And so she says, what happened, my daughter? Now watch this. And Ruth told her everything the man had done for her. And then verse 17, she said this, he gave me 6 measures of barley because he said, now don't miss this. Check this out. Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. That's not a coincidence. Just 2 chapters earlier, Naomi returned from Moab, and she said to her friends, you're not going to call me Naomi anymore. You're going to call me bitter. Why? Because I went away full, and I came home empty. And now through the unfolding drama of God's provision and God's providence, Ruth, her daughter-in-law, who insisted that she go back to Bethlehem with Naomi, says to her, through clearly God's orchestration of this relationship with Boaz, Ruth says this, Naomi, I have brought back much because my family redeemer said to me, do not go back empty. And there's just such a life-changing principle in this narrative that I don't want you to miss. It's very simply this, that our God brings fullness out of emptiness. Our God takes those who are empty at the end of their rope and at the end of themselves, and he makes them full. And he gives them an identity. And he proves to be a provider and a God of grace and mercy who shows tremendous and overwhelming generosity even to a foreigner. And this same Naomi who came back empty, now Ruth is coming back to full. And you see the unfolding hand of God. And listen, it may be during this current season that you're experiencing some measure of empty. It may not be this season of all. You know, maybe you've been able to navigate these days and survive in such a way you haven't seen a huge difference other than you can't go places you want to go. Maybe you're thinking back to a year ago when you had to overcome cancer. Maybe you're thinking back to 5 years ago when you experienced an incredible loss. Maybe you're thinking of something that was a really difficult season for you. And right now you're just mindful of the fact that, yes, I can recall the faithfulness of God. It's always easier to see it in hindsight than it is in the present. But make no mistake about it. Whatever you're dealing with today or whatever you and I will deal with in the future, we can rest assured that our God is working in our waiting to this end, that he's going to bring an empty, desperate, broken people to a place of fullness. This is what God has always done. Just look at the history of Israel up to this point. I mean, just look at the story of Joseph and how the nation of Israel is navigating their early history. And you've got this guy named Joseph who was mistreated by his brothers, sold into slavery, hauled off to Egypt. Everyone think he's gone and he's left for dead. And before you know it, years later, in the midst of an incredible famine, yet another famine in the land, it is the brothers who betrayed him are now kneeling before him as he is the second in command, and he is in a position to provide for his own family and his own people, and without his provision, they would have starved to death. And how did God get Joseph to Egypt to become a means of salvation to his people? It was through tremendous hardship and suffering. How did God work through the Passover? He worked through the sacrificial death of an innocent victim to bring redemption to an unworthy people. These people went out of Egypt, and where did they end up? Right in front of the sea. And Israel begins to complain immediately, Moses, you marched us 150 feet so we can die here next to the sea. And we know what God did then. And you have this people who then begin to settle in their promised land, and they come up against a great city called Jericho. And what does God do there in the midst of this tremendous opposition? He says, I tell you what, get Jason Millsaps up to the front of the line. And get the praise team and get the band, and you march around this city a few times. See what happens. I can only imagine if it were me in Joshua's position. All right, boys, what's the military strategy? We're gonna walk around and sing a little bit. And yet God delivered his people. Listen, time and time again, God works in the waiting of his people, in the desperation of his people. He orchestrates circumstances, not coincidences, appointments, in such a way that God displays his incredible power and his providence. And now look at Naomi. Broken, bitter, wanting to plan and forget any of the things that happened to her. But yet now she's in a very different place. This woman who came back empty is now full. Because this is how God is working in our waiting. And you and I are waiting even today. And actually, I'm not even talking about this COVID crisis and when we can go out to eat again and actually come back to worship in person again. No, you know what? We're waiting for something much better than that. Because we're in a broken, fallen world. And you know what we're waiting for? For the breaking of the eastern sky and the return of our Savior. And on that day when we see our Savior face to face, the Lord then, with finality, will replace our emptiness with his fullness. And he is working now, make no mistake about it, to prepare us for that day so that when we see our Savior face to face, we'll be overwhelmed with gratitude and ongoing eternal worship.